Well, welcome, CIRTL comrades, to our CIRTL cast. This is the first session of our CIRTL cast on innovative methods to integrate writing assignments in the STEM classroom. My name is Peter Motivali. I'm a professor in natural resources and the University of Missouri CIRTL leader, with a little co-leader. And I have the pleasure of moderating a little bit and help to organize this CIRTL cast. And I have the pleasure of introducing our first speaker, who is Dr. Amy Lannin. She is an assistant professor at the University of Missouri College of Education. She has her focus on English education, and she has over 25 years of experience in writing across the curriculum, and she has led our campus writing program here at the University of Missouri for quite a number of years. And her talk is going to be on changing science writing and communication skills for the modern professional. And I think Kate Diamond wanted to, and maybe Miranda, were going to give us a few pointers about some of the technical aspects when we get involved and participate in this discussion. So Kate, did you, or Miranda, do you want to discuss that?
Yep, so it looks like Kate's having a few connectivity issues, so I can jump in here. So welcome everyone who's joined today. So for today's CIRTL class, if you would like to learn more about CIRTL, feel free to click the link here. So we're just going to go through a brief technology check, kind of explain a few different ways to interact with your class today. So the first option here is to raise your hand. So you'll see this under the participant panel on the left-hand corner of your screen. This is a great way to communicate to instructors that, you have a question or you have a comment. Just remember that when you're done raising your hand, to re-click this button so it will lower your hand. And then you can turn your talk button on to contribute using your microphone, and then your video button as well. And we would say it really helps with online interaction if you do use these talk and video buttons. But if you do have a quick comment, you can actually post a little comment in the chat window, and this is a great way to maybe ask a question or maybe if you have a comment during class. You can also, Kate and I will be here in the background to help you with any technology issues that you might be having. And then over here, you'll see that there's a whiteboard tool on the left-hand corner of your screen. The main tool that we might be using today is this text box tool. You can actually write directly on the screen, which can be very helpful if your instructors will post maybe a discussion or a question and answer. Okay, so I'll hand it back to the instructors, and if you do have a question, feel free to type it into the chat window if you're having technical difficulties. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to join. I would love to just be able to know where everybody's signing on from, but from Columbia, Missouri, it's sunny and beautiful, and we welcome you to this time together. So as the title slide shows, we're really talking about science writing, and underneath that I have two phrases that the faculty that we work together with at the University of Missouri, we're about writing to learn and learning to write. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about will come under those areas. And so just a quick definition, when I'm thinking about writing to learn, it's the idea that through my writing, I'm learning, I'm figuring things out. And so as a teacher, I want my students to use writing in a way to learn more deeply the content of my course. In learning to write, well, that's where I want them to learn how to be better communicators, writers in the discipline. So whatever discipline your background is, where you're coming from, that's where you know best what that writing should look like. So those are the two areas we're going to focus on, and I want to give you a little background also of why writing is so important to us here. Writing, as we've studied it, researched it, experienced it, we know it's very generative. And some of you have probably that when you start writing something, you start discovering more things. It helps work through the chaos in your mind, and thoughts form more carefully. And some of that is because as you are generating thought in writing, you're actually seeing it. And so this idea of thought made visible here, that you're seeing your ideas. The third idea is that in writing, it's a record of our learning. It allows us to experience and then write about it and see that experience and record that experience and thus demonstrate our learning that way. It's also varied in form. I can write a list. I can write a researched article. I can write a memo, an email, and I could go on and on. So writing is important for us to think about from the many forms it can take in our different classrooms. And the last thing I just want to point out about why we focus on writing is that it's a very active way of learning. It's engaging, it's very personal. And so that's one of the things when we do any workshop on writing, it's reminding people that when we write and we give our writing to someone, it's giving a part of ourselves to that person in many ways. And that's a bit of a scary venture for our students. And I'm guessing for those of you that are coming out of, you're involved in graduate programs right now, and you get that. You understand so much of your career rests on you being an effective writer. Janet Emig wrote a piece that was rather seminal to this, and it's writing as a mode of learning. And she explored how writers reach higher cognitive levels of thought through the cycle of writing. And so that's the foundation of what we're jumping into now when we think about writing. And I want to tell you that my presentation here is the starting of what will follow the rest of this month. And you'll get to hear from people who are part of the campus writing program at the University of Missouri. And so I think it's good to know a little bit about how this program came about. It's a good model for other universities looking at doing a writing across the curriculum kind of program. 30 years ago, it was faculty across campus, not just in one department, but truly across campus, who came together to say, we do care about writing, and we want to see something happen to get our students really writing across the curriculum. So they formed a writing board, and that group of faculty, consisting of 18, formed the guidelines, policies, practices, and for 30 years now, that is still the group that guides writing on this campus. And so Dr. Motivali, whom you just met, Dr. Glazer, Dr. Winholtz, myself, we all are involved in the writing board on this campus, either currently or just recently. And on that writing board, we review assignments, course proposals that our colleagues submit, and we look to see, are these assignments reaching the guidelines that our faculty say they want to see in a writing intensive course. And our undergraduates have to take 2 writing intensive courses to graduate. And what that means is we're not just looking for a lot of writing. Certainly quantity is part of it, but we're looking for writing that's going to go throughout the semester, and quality of assignments that will help develop critical thinking. We also want to make sure that students receive good feedback, and feedback either from faculty or a teaching assistant, maybe a peer, hopefully all of the above, and that guides students in their revision. So this is the important context that you're going to be hearing the things I'll share, but then also my 3 colleagues who will be presenting over the next few weeks. We'll be really taking a lot of what makes up this writing program and unpacking that for you, helping you see what that looks like in particular assignments. So I want to now take us into a chance to hear from all of you. If writing is so important, students are learning to write in the discipline, what are those features of effective writing? What would we want to see? What would we want to look at to find out that students are developing effective writing? You notice in the blank here, and you already see some people writing in, this is where you want to compose your thoughts right there on the screen. So I'm going to take a moment and let you put your responses there.
And I'll just chime in to say, as a reminder, you can write directly on the slide by going to the vertical toolbar to the left, clicking the fourth icon down, that's the A with some lines next to it, selecting that icon, and dragging a text box directly on the slide. If you're having trouble using that tool, go ahead and write directly into the chat window, and we can copy it onto the slide for you.
To continue putting your ideas down, I'm going to start commenting on just a few things we're seeing. First of all, you may think, how can we actually generate similar lists? Because we probably are coming from some slightly different disciplines. And certainly different assignments, different disciplines will have some of their unique views of what's going to be effective. Each assignment that we might give is going to also have some different features. But one of the things that has been interesting to me over the years is that as I look at writing that comes out of various disciplines, there are some features that are pretty common. And I think we see many of them here. I mean, one that jumped out right away is that, we write with an audience in mind. And that can really affect, when you think about, if you know your audience, that will determine the words you choose, the level of vocabulary and the type of vocabulary. So audience is so important. We're also seeing several comments about some of the organization to the writing, so logical sequences, cohesive structure, logical, good transitions. So those are things that, we want to see writing that can be organized, that we can follow it along, we don't get lost. And that organization will certainly, in some cases, it's ordered very chronologically. In some cases, it's a very standard organization for what's expected in the type of publications we do. I'm also seeing that we have references to citations, and so that we also know we value that in our disciplines. Having good, well documented sources, works cited. And through this, I may have missed some of them, but there's the idea that we have well-supported arguments. We've definitely got some ideas being developed in our writing, that in other words, content matters. The message that we're sharing is so important. And to get that message across, we also know that avoiding errors helps. I tell my students, it's like getting rid of any static. When you're trying to find something to listen to, if you've got static, that makes it hard to get the message. So you've given us a wonderful list of features. One thought about this is, from this list, it helps you know that, okay, when I am having my own writing or student writing, these would be the kinds of things I might look for. It also is what we would use to build a rubric. If I'm going to assess student writing, this is where I begin. But I want us to now think about, if we're going to actually have this as some of our end goal of students writing reaching some of these criteria, then how would we get there? What do we do in our assignments that help us to get there? So here's our next time to throw out some ideas. And I want you to think now for a writing assignment, maybe one you have been given before or one you have assigned. What makes that effective? You may want to even start with the really bad assignment that you received that just left you really confused. And you said, oh, I wish the instructor had told me to do this or that. So once again, please write your comments below, but this time thinking about, from the teacher's standpoint, what makes for an effective writing assignment. Somebody really likes rubrics. So I'm curious, when we see rubrics, what is it about rubrics that we like? The clear goals. I don't know if that's in response to the rubrics, but that is what a rubric can give us. So I'm going to talk through some of the great ideas you have here. And I must say, people have written books and done studies analyzing writing assignments. And so the kinds of comments you're giving us are certainly in line with what we would want to see in an assignment. And I will make the comment that oftentimes when we are stepping into the role of teaching, it's so important that we stop to think about what that experience was like for us as students. And so I think really good teachers are aware of what it is like for a student, and they reflect on the student experience. And so you're presenting some ideas that I think also show that you are thinking about what the student is expecting and needing. So we're seeing references to multiple steps, outlining, breaking assignments down, and that is something that we're going to talk a little bit more about too as we get going today and in future sessions. I love it that we're seeing topics that are of interest to the students, that if we can engage students with topics maybe they choose or have a say in, topics that are going to connect to them, topics that are going to also get them finding that very relevant, and we're going to see examples of that. And yes, we're seeing interesting pop up there, good. Defined audience, so that's a real key one right there. Clarity, so that's where I think having it, purpose is so important. Clarity also makes me think of the rubrics and the goals that we know, again, where we are headed. And the instructions that was just very laid out so that students aren't trying to guess what they're supposed to do. Challenging, I think, is also a good one because we don't want assignments that, again, that students think, well, I don't really need this. But instead, one of the things I like to do is ask my students why we would be doing certain things in our classroom, or, you know, if they were in charge of designing something to reach our goals, what would that look like? And challenging things do help us to grow, and sometimes students just need that reminder. All right, so these are wonderful. What I want us to do now is to start looking at some ways to organize all of this as we think about assigning writing. So I want to introduce you to the work of John Bean. John Bean is the author of the book Engaging Ideas, and this is a book really written for faculty, teaching assistants, people involved in teaching with writing in post-secondary. And in Bean's book, as well as in other sources like that, the idea of a raft has been used. Whether or not you like this doesn't matter, but it does kind of help us to organize some of the main features. These are not the only features, but it is one way we have used with faculty to think about how we might structure a writing assignment. And so the way the raft works, the first thing is, yes, the role. Is the role, the purpose very clear? That as a writer, I may inform, I may be arguing a point, persuading something, exploring something. So that's one important part that we saw you all mentioned in the slide before. Secondly is audience. And this may be the area that I see missing quite often when we're looking at assignments, and especially if maybe the student writing that's done as a result is not the most positive, but sometimes it's that audience that is missing. And once students know who they're writing to, it helps them make really good decisions. And I don't know about all of you, I'm getting some other screens on the, there we go. Okay, thank you. So the next thing would be the form. So the form or the genre, if I'm writing a memo versus a proposal, a lab report versus a white paper, our students may need to know from you as the instructor, what are those specific qualities of that particular form or genre of writing. We've all learned certain forms and we may just be able to almost do them in our sleep. But our students may need us to really walk through and do a think aloud as we have learned how to both read and write in the various genres of our field. And the last thing in the wrap is just really thinking about the task that is at hand. And that is either the problem to address, the data to present, or whatever it is that students are really working with. And I know that most of us here are probably not coming out of the world of rhetoric, but it is something that is behind all this look at writing and writing across the curriculum. So I want to take just a moment and ask if we can jump in with an emoticon about how we're feeling, slow down, speed up. Kate, if you need to remind us where our emoticons are, but hopefully people see that above their name and can just choose one to kind of let us know how you're doing.
Sure thing. So if you look at the top of the participant panel, underneath your name, there are 4 icons. The emoticon is the first icon.
Oh, and I like it. A definition of rhetoric. And we use that term in different contexts, but what I'm using it here for is this idea of we're communicating a message by understanding that when we communicate, we're looking at the purpose and the audience, the whole context of a writing situation or a communication situation. And so these would be all rhetorical decisions that a writer would make or that a teacher would establish when designing an assignment. So it's really about clear communication to reach the purpose that you have. So thank you for that question. And if anybody wants to jump in also with microphone to ask a question, we'll do this also as we go through some of the other slides, but now would be a good time.
Amy, I had a question. This is Peter Motivali.
Yes, Peter.
One of the things that I feel like is important with assignments is that there be some legacy or impact of the assignment so that it's not just for the instructor, but it's also meant to have some potential for it to impact I don't know, an audience, or to have it be around for some time. I'm wondering what you think about that.
Okay. I was losing you for a minute there.
Should I repeat the question?
Yes. In fact, I have found that probably one of the best things I've ever done to motivate student writing to make that. Oh, do you want me to repeat it for you?
No, I didn't know if you had heard me. That's the other thing.
Peter's question was what to do to really, I think, bring in that. Oh, I did. Yeah. All right. So let me know in the chat if I'm not coming across okay, if you can't hear me. But the role of publishing our work, and I know that Peter's going to possibly take us into some of what he's done that way. But when we publish, we have a very real audience for students. And it also gives a very direct purpose that's usually very relevant. And I find it's one of the best ways for students to take editing, revising and editing very seriously. So that would be one thing, and I hope as we get down the road, again, that publishing aspect of student work can be looked at. And publishing can look very differently as well. It might be something that is shared as an in-class kind of presentation or publication, as well as something that could go outside of class or into a website. Okay. Now, so Kate, I'm not seeing anybody's emoticons, and I didn't know where those might appear.
They show up temporarily, so I know I saw a lot of smiley faces, but they would have disappeared by now.
Okay, so I needed to see them right then, I guess. All right. And is my sound okay?
Yes, you're sounding much better now.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's move on, and we're going to actually do some chatting here in just a bit in the chat box. But you're going to have an assignment, everyone. So we have an assignment to review. And so I'm going to show you an assignment, and it's just a portion of an assignment, but we're going to review that here in just a minute. And as I'm talking a little bit about that assignment or reading it aloud for us, I want you to, in the chat box, then list the elements of the assignment, as in who is the audience, what is the purpose, what form is that writing going to be in, and what is the task or problem, and then anything else that you may want to put in the chat box. But those are the questions. Again, it's the raft. It's the role, the audience, the form, the task. I'm going to jump to the next slide, and we're going to see an assignment that is out of agriculture economics. So that might be an unusual field for some of you. And here was the assignment, the title, Memos to Management. And here was the assignment that the instructor gave his students. This is it. You have caught the attention of the CEO. Your boss, the chief marketing officer, was just fired. You wonder why it took so long. The CEO is considering you for your boss's old position. Congratulations. The CEO has requested a memo by the end of the day. He or she wants to know about pricing for your new product. And again, this is a course that's actually on new product marketing. So you have a product that you've been studying. Now back to the assignment. Specifically, you need to address what pricing strategy is the most appropriate for the product. How much will you charge the customer exactly? And most importantly, why? If you get it right, you get the job. Good luck. So if you would all now jump into the chat window over on your left and put down what you see as audience, purpose, the form this writing is taking, the task, And anything else you notice is unique to this writing assignment? Yes, it is like Shark Tank. Okay, so it's pretty easy to see the audience for this. I mean, our chats are very clearly seen, even from the very title of this, it's to the management. It's a memo. And so students know, or at least they're going to need to be taught, what does a memo look like? What kind of language would I use in a memo to my boss? That kind of thing is going to be really important here. The purpose is to persuade. We definitely want, if we were the person writing this, we want to get that job. So we have a very clear purpose to use our information to persuade. So we know the form, the memo, we know the audience to our management, the purpose to persuade and to show our information. Anything else you notice that's unique to this or interesting about this assignment? And I'm going to, Courtney, you mentioned that the task is to convey your knowledge about product pricing. And I wanted us to think about how this kind of writing assignment is connecting to the content, that the instructor has content knowledge or writing that students need to be learning, or excuse me, content students need to be learning as they are writing. So it's a writing to learn this information. And so that task where they're having to really dig into product marketing, understanding new products, understanding some of the cost comparisons, they're going to have to be able to then develop some of that knowledge. You can also that knowledge of this particular writing task. So there is writing in this particular discipline that the instructor wants them to learn. So Dr. Glacier says, yes, it's the form of an executive summary with attachments of evidence, very motivating, as Jolene says, very open-ended, casual, usually like a joke in the way that the assignment, which would be fun, you know, for students to get something like this. So this would be an assignment that when we looked at it and studied this in our writing program, we were seeing this as a good example of something that's very relevant, very authentic to the discipline. Students are being able to jump into this assignment and do some really interesting things. And when I interviewed students from this class, they talked about the very real life experience this gave them. And they would compare writing like this to, let's say, doing a multiple choice test. And they said, you know, this kind of work that we have to do in these assignments, this is critical thinking. It's not bullet point thinking, as one student said. And as Susanna's saying, yes, this is preparing them for jobs. Okay, so Peter's asking about, you know, when students want to know page numbers and other specific details. So that would be something that, yeah, oftentimes we're asked, yeah, you know, of course, when does it do? How long does it have to be? So those are also things that in writing this completely out, we would want to address. And if length is not an issue, then we need to explain that. The memo itself would be the genre itself would mean that it's going to be fairly short and to the point. We don't want multiple page memos. Our boss wants to be able to read it quickly. So I'm going to take a moment, and on the next slide, I want to introduce you to Dr. Besson. He is the author of that assignment and is one of several professors in the agricultural economics. And he even said, when I interviewed him about this course, is that, you know, in these assignments, he wants to give students an understanding of the marketing process, of new products, how you market them, how you have to go through that. So the assignments are developed to take students through a sequence of experiences. But secondly, he wants them to get over that fear of writing and that inability of communicating. And he came out of the industry, and he felt like that was one of the areas his colleagues or people he worked with struggled with writing at times. And so he wants his students to have very authentic writing to the workplace. So moving on, let's think about then some of these principles of assignment design. I'm going to ask you to turn on your microphone to ask some questions and maybe to pose ideas. If you've gotten to experience a really interesting assignment, well developed, while you're thinking, I want to just also mention that in Dr. Modavali's sessions, as well as Dr. Winholtz and Dr. Glazer, you'll get to see more of these assignments broken out in greater detail to really see how these principles of assignment design can build. But let's hear from some of you.
Amy, this is Peter Modavali. I think an important, I'm learning more about assignments that we need to have some kind of scaffolding so students have multiple stages in the writing assignment, because it tends to then allow them to actually think out what they're doing in their writing.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So you said talk about an assignment that was good for you. I just finished graduating from undergrad and now I'm a grad student. I think one of my best assignments for writing was in my senior year molecular ecology class. We had to do a literature review, and so it involved kind of doing an outline where we sent our ideas to the professor, and then we read a lot of papers and reviewed them. But it was a multi-step process, like Peter was just talking about, with a lot of scaffolding. And because there were multiple steps to the process, it meant it was really easy for us to think through our ideas and learn from it.
Very good. Thank you, Megan. I was in a class yesterday, a graduate class, and kind of what Megan described, one of the students was saying that if we think about also ways to combat plagiarism, we give students opportunities where they are taking the readings and maybe doing some really in-depth annotations. And so maybe week one, we're doing this in-depth annotation on this source, and then in the next week, a different source. So we're not leaving aside that first source. We're going to keep building. We're going to keep pulling these different sources or studies or whatever the literature is that we're working from, and so that they are building into then what can become a really strong literature review. And also something like that, it's not as easy to just go and cut and paste from somewhere. You're having to really work through that because you're, as she said, approaching it in steps together, talking about it, writing about it. And thank you for the microbiology lab example. So the idea of pitching an idea for funding, there have been some excellent writing experiences that we have seen in different classes and in different departments where students do write either practice doing some kind of a funding proposal or conference proposal. There have been a couple classes that have done these and actually submitted them. So it wasn't just a practice, but they were actually writing for true grant funding programs, and then received, many of them then received funding. And so that is something that, again, is very authentic, and we know from our own experiences, if we've done any of that kind of writing, that puts together so many of our learning principles, the content that we need to know, the literature we need to be based on, and then how we pitch that and write persuasively for that audience. Oh, and the videotaped elevator pitch. Yes, boy, don't we all need to have that assignment? So that would be a wonderful way for students to have to be able to be very concise. So I'm seeing that we're giving some ideas here, just some really good, motivating, engaging, authentic assignments. To give students a hands-on, I'm looking at the top, hands-on experience or a lot of source material before asking them to write, get them thinking. Correct. We, of course, know our literature, we know our content, and students need to be taken into, kind of step inside of our brains a little bit. I do like this idea of a think aloud, so that when I would take maybe an article that's a little bit more difficult in my field and read aloud part of it, so my students can hear the thinking that I'm doing as I'm comprehending this source, and then asking them to do some of that practice either with a partner or maybe it's in writing, but definitely in talking where they have to think aloud and where they struggle, letting them know it's okay. That's how we learn to be literate in our field. If somebody had written something and it then was taken down about helping students, I think, figuring out how to write. And I would love to know if there's a little bit more on that. Or what that question maybe was getting at. I'm going to pause before I would go on in case if somebody does want to do that. If, let's say, you're thinking of students who step into your class and you're seeing that, wow, I just feel like there's a whole lot of writing support that's needed before we can get to some of these other tasks. Couple things to keep in mind is that when they step into some of these courses that are still some new content, students are not going to be comfortable with writing in those areas right away. Here's an example. So I'm out of the social sciences, and a colleague of mine is out of humanities. And she described needing to write a proposal, not in humanities, but in a social sciences setting. And she is a scholar in composition. But she described how her writing was so full of errors and just poorly constructed sentences that it made her realize that when we step out of our comfortable area of what we know and can talk about, and we go into another area, that we kind of lose some of the fluid communication, verbal, written skills that we think we should have. And so it does take practice. Now, if your students are writing every day, and they're getting lots of exposure to practicing the language of your discipline and your course, it's going to take some time, but you should start seeing improvement. But one of the things is just to know that transfer into a new writing situation can take some time, and it definitely takes practice. Okay, so here's a good question for us. In lab classes, it is hard to come up with assignments. So how would you try creating assignments to help them learn to write better? What ideas do we have? I think Peter said some things here. Peter, do you want to elaborate on your idea that you put in the chat?
I would say in the lab classes I've taught that it's very important that students learn how to write clear reports. And in many cases, there's a format that's done, and that's a very important thing to learn on how to do that. And then the other thing is to be able to write a step-by-step methodology so that others can do the same type of lab procedure. And so writing that in a clear and concise way in steps, I think is a very important assignment that might be one to consider.
I was just working with one of our faculty members last week, and she was talking about this very thing about some lab reports. And we were brainstorming about also taking the lab reports, depending on, what your purpose would be for what students should experience, but thinking about, whatever they're pulling as important information and findings from that lab report, what if they were to take now and think about how do I communicate this to, and then maybe create different scenarios or different audiences. So kind of reformatting, they've got this information. Now, what do I do if I'm communicating this to, it's going to depend on what it is they might be studying, but it could be maybe an audience out in the public, a community, city, government, school, something like that. So a way for students to think about how they would take their information and use it in a different scenario.
Kalita Abraham has her hand raised. Amy.
Okay.
Hi, Amy. I just wanted to make a I just wanted to make a comment about like an assignment design that could be interesting. That I think it's something I saw when I was learning to write. I think there's always like different writing styles, right? And even if you're writing like a scientific report, you still put your being, and your personality and your style in that. So I think it would be important, even to avoid plagiarism, to teach students, like to get a paper, to get a report, and tell them to write all those ideas with their own words and teach them to develop their own style. And I had like a kind of a negative experience with that because I used to have a very, very interesting and very intelligent professor that wrote really, really well all his papers, but he wanted to kind of impose the way he writes to the students, to us, and that kind of inhibits, your own style to be developed. So I think that's very important because first, maybe you're never going to write like that professor. And second, maybe not just because you're not as good, but because that's not your style. So I think it's good to like give an assignment to leave it open for the students to develop their own style. And that way they can probably avoid even more plagiarism.
Very good. Thank you. Those are excellent points. I've often in the past told my students that they should be able to have enough styles to their writing, just like they would have different outfits in their closet. So what I mean by that is I may put on, I had a teacher friend who said you don't plow your fields in a prom dress. So you don't go out in a fancy outfit to work in the garden or work in the field. You would wear work clothes. And that our language and our style of writing can and should be very flexible. And so I like to give students varieties to ranges of assignments and writing experiences where they're going from more informal to more formal and seeing how they can take on a different voice as a writer for the context. And that can be very powerful. We had an engineer at one of our workshops who talked about, he has to be able to write clearly and effectively and in all the right vocabulary for his fellow engineers. But then he also has to be able to take those same ideas and write them like for the city council. And that means, maybe not quite as many of the technical terms. And it's a different format. And so helping students see, I think, the power of language be flexible like that is really important. So thank you for that idea. Okay, so we've put together a lot of ideas here. I want to take us through just a couple more ideas and then open it up for some final question and answer. This next slide then is really a good summary, I think, of what you all have helped us think about and what we can do in assigning and teaching students, because I also am a firm believer that I can write the world's best assignment ever, and it still isn't going to do much if I don't also put into practice really smart teaching that will support students' writing. So again, I can have a good assignment, but if I don't also put into practice some teaching that will support writers, then again, I'm probably not going to be very happy with the results. So what can instructors do to help writers be successful? I'm going to talk through these, but if you want to add things either in the chat or down below, please do that. Some of this is review, and some of it also is going to be a good preview of our future sessions. The first is, as we've talked about today, we need clear, relevant, and well-developed assignments. So whatever needs to go into that assignment so that students kind of know where they're going, how long it's going to be, why they're doing it, who they're writing for. I often say to myself that you get what you assign. And so if I get student writing that I am really frustrated with, and I think, oh my goodness, they really missed it, I need to look at my assignment, because probably I could have done something more to be clear and develop the ideas I want them to develop. Second, scaffolding. Peter mentioned this earlier. And what we mean by scaffolding is that we may break up large assignments into smaller segments. We will do things to actually help students build their ideas. If you think of scaffolding that surrounds buildings, the scaffolding, the purpose of those, to give those supports, you start down below and then you build up and you build up and you've got support as you go. There's lots of ways to scaffold an assignment. And some of you have shared things already tonight, but a real simple one is that if you do assign a large paper, maybe towards the end of the semester, and think about how that could be broken down. Maybe the literature review itself could be an assignment, or maybe separate annotations that students are learning how to really go deep into some of that reading. Each of those annotations is an assignment that then is pulled into a full literature review. The third one down is feedback. One of the hallmarks of the campus writing program at University of Missouri is that we do expect students are going to get feedback. And so that's actually where we provide a lot of funding to make sure we've got teaching assistants working with instructors, maybe as a peer learning assistant. We also support the use of peer feedback, and you'll be able to hear more about that in future weeks. But feedback is what writers need. It's what we all need when we write. We get feedback from reviewers, from instructors, from peers, and we have to set that up for our students. It doesn't usually happen just on its own. The next one is support the writing process. I mean, there's lots of processes that go into writing. And if we're going to assign writing, we need to think about, are we giving time for the planning? Am I putting, for instance, opportunities for students to talk about the assignment, to explain the assignment to one another, to maybe do some in-class writing out of what they're going to be doing, what the questions are. I sometimes give them a note card and say, I want a one-sentence summary. What's your paper about? Something to get them planning, rehearsing, going through before they actually draft the paper. We often see papers going through multiple drafts, and so each draft may get either a peer feedback or maybe a TA or faculty feedback, and then that guides the revising. And we also encourage that even 10 minutes of your class to talk about how you revise, what revision looks like, what you expect revision to be. That's important because students may not always know what revising means. Yeah, we may think they do, but they may think it's just editing. I'm just going to fix my spelling and that's good. But revising is revising, re-seeing. I look at it again, I look at it again. It's like a revision by re-seeing it. Another thing that can support writers is when we do provide variety in genre and length of assignments, purpose of assignments, as I mentioned on just one of the previous slides, giving that range of writing, informal to formal, can be helpful. For some of you, it may be providing models and examples. I know some people don't want to do that, and I understand that, but sometimes a model can be really good, as you also can show how you would read and understand the piece of writing. So let's see what you've added. We've got make sure students are getting the core ideas of the assignment so that it sticks with them. Very good. And I like that idea of that piece of writing is something they can go back to. And as we find assignments that generate that kind of writing, those should be celebrated and shared. Development of a good writing assignment takes time, and that includes assessment of the impact and improvement based on that feedback. I know that we also are nearing end of time, so I'm going to jump ahead here to the next slide. And this is going to be one last one that I just want to kind of mention some of the things we've been talking about. This is still from that agriculture economics class with Dr. Beston. This is one of the last assignments he gives. It's a competitive analysis. However, this is an example of scaffolding, because earlier in the semester, the students did various parts of these pieces, and now these pieces are being put together into one assignment that becomes their final competitive analysis. And he feels this is one of his most effective assignments. It forces students to really think critically. They can't just go pull something off the internet. So we want to close with thinking about, now as researchers, what do we learn from this? How can we connect our teaching to research? And as one of the questions on the couple previous slides even said, how can you take your assessment, your thinking of what students are doing, and turn that into something you want to know more about, and gathering that information from those assessments and making decisions about your teaching, but then also thinking about it through the eyes of a researcher. So we hope that you'll continue to share ideas and questions. And if anybody wants to jump on with microphones for some closing thoughts or comments, I think we have maybe 2 minutes.
Amy, I think it's really important, this connecting the teaching to research, and a very important part of that is getting information on the impacts, doing surveys, and other types of gathering of information about the impact of your assignment. And so that, I think, is a very important part of this whole going to the research part of it.
And Susanna, great point about, taking this as a collaboration, because that's where, as you collaborate with people in other fields, it's going to just, make this a really good way to look at your data, look at your questions together. Time for one more question or comment. Okay, so I thank you all. This has been fun. The time seemed to go fast, but hopefully this gave you some things to think about. And we look forward to continuing this conversation next week. Dr. Motivali will take us into his session, Improving Student Science Through Creative Assignments, Incorporating Diverse Audiences and Media. So with that, I sign off and see you next week.
Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, Peter, for organizing this event and for all the work you put into it. And thanks so much to everyone else. I just do want to emphasize that these surveys are quite useful to us, the information we get from them. So please do take a quick minute to fill them out. If not right now, then bookmark the URL for later tonight and fill it out. Share your thoughts with us. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.